What's up guys, Kyle here again, and today we're checking out one of my favorite amps on the planet, the Splawn Competition 50. Let's do it! Alright guys, hope you're doing great out there today. If this is your first time here at my channel, what I do is I take awesome high gain amps, overdrives, guitars, cabs, speakers, pickups. I record them with a simple SM57 setup, and I give you guys the unprocessed audio on your end. So if you're into East End or thrash riffs, drop C hardcore riffs, and dudes that might be having a stroke during the filming of this video, you're in the right place. Consider hitting the like button and subscribing on your way out so you don't miss any more of my stuff. Thanks! Alright guys, as I said in the intro of today's video, the Splawn Competition 50, one of my favorite amps on the planet. Because what it is a stripped down quick rod in a 50 watt package with no clean channel. So basically, it's everything that I personally need because being a belligerent amateur, I don't need a clean channel. So therefore, this only has the gain channel with the 3 gear settings and nothing else. This is a single channel amp. It does have an effects loop on the back, and this is one of the newer models that has the volume control for the effects loop that you can engage and use as a master volume. So if you guys have been coming to my channel for a little bit, you know that I absolutely love Splawn amps. They are some of my favorite amps on the planet, and I use them for every show and every recording that my band Bushido Code does because Derek and I both love these things. We think they do the hot rodded Marshall thing the best out of any of the other amps out there for thrash metal. And that is because the low end on these amps is massive, but it is also super tight and percussive. So when you're hitting those perfectly synced down-tuned chugs and the kick drum and the bass are all hitting at the same time, these things literally punch like no other amp that I own. And that includes 5150s, that includes the XXX. And on top of that, this amp has absolutely exceptional note clarity. This is one of the clearest amps that I own. So when you're playing big full chords or when you're playing complex stuff, you will hear every little bit of it for better or for worse, because if you're not a tight guitarist, this amp will absolutely force you to tighten up your playing. It'll force you to work on your rhythm hand, and it will force you to make sure that you're fretting each note that you're hitting cleanly, because if you don't, it's not gonna hide any of your mistakes for you, much like a rectifier or a 5150 would. So not only do I love this amp because it sounds incredible, it forces me to be a better player, and that is something that I definitely need to focus on a lot more than I do. So if you're not familiar with the Splawn Quick Rod, what that is essentially a hot rodded 2203 circuit with 3 separate gears. Now what these gears are essentially levels of compression and of gain. So gear 1 is going to be your lightest level of compression and gain. That's going to be more in line with like something like say a Marshall 1959 Super Lead. Gear 2 is going to be a hot rodded JCM 800 or 2203 type of tone, and gear 3 is going to be a super hot rodded JCM 800 2203. So gear 3 is the most gainy and the most compressed, but honestly there's not a huge difference between gear 2 and gear 3. I tend to live on gear 2 because it's slightly more open and it has plenty of gain for my needs, but we'll check out all 3 gears. The Splawn stuff, in my opinion, is really as close as it gets to the raw 2203 tone. There is a little bit more compression, there is a lot more low end, and a lot more gain, but overall, if you sit this back to back with a good JMP or JCM 2203, this amp will sound very close to those. And yeah, that's why I love it, because I've always loved the stock 2203 tone. I just always wish that it had more gain and had more low end. Well, this accomplishes both of those, and not only does it have more low end, it's super tight and super percussive, and I just love it. So that's that. Now, with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump into some sound samples of this amplifier. For that intro clip, I was using my Balaguer Typhon with a Seymour Duncan distortion in the bridge. We had the Electric Eye Mud Killer on, boosting the front end of the amp, and we are going through a Randall XL 412 with vintage 30s SM57 on the V30. But we're gonna go ahead, we are going to put all of our EQ controls back to noon, put our gain down at 9 o'clock, and we're going to go over to gear 1. And here is how this thing sounds with no boost out in front in gear 1. I'm not even a classic rock player, and that just makes me want to play classic rock style riffs all day long. Honestly, just like that, you really don't have to do much, and you're in AC/DC tone or territory. We could probably back the mids down just a tad, push that bass up a little bit, and add a little bit of presence. And that sounds so good for the classic rock stuff. So the mids on the Splawn are definitely, a lot of people have described this amp as having weird mids, and it's definitely, I would say, almost quackier in the mid-range than a Marshall 2203, which is going to be pretty spiky in those upper mid frequencies. So they're a little bit more rounded out and a little bit more modern on the Splawn, but even so, they sound super, super good the way that they're dialed in here. Let's actually back treble down and push those mids up a little bit more. Let's go ahead and push that gain up to 11 o'clock. Tons of note separation in that big chord. That Marshall Kerrang is there in full effect. If you guys can't tell, I love playing through this amp, even for styles of music that I don't typically play. I think this thing sounds super good. Let's go ahead and boost that gain up even more. Let's see what this channel is truly capable of in the gain department. Okay, so that's with the gain almost all the way up. Here it is maxed out. This is more gain than you're ever gonna get out of any sort of Plexi or 1959 Super Lead circuit. Yeah, we're not here for classic rock riffs, guys, but I just figured I would show you those. This amp, although it does that stuff, and obviously it does it extremely well, it excels at hot rodded, high gain Marshall tones. So let's go ahead, let's back that gain down to noon. Let's go over to gear 2. Okay, so as you can already tell, a little bit less bright, a little bit broader in the mids, and a slightly more modern sounding. Let's go ahead and pick that gain up. And even with no boost on, this thing is tight. Absolutely love it. So yeah, as you can tell, we've got a decent amount of gain, but what happens when we get it up to, say, noon? Ah, it's so good. It's so good. All right, gain up to 2 o'clock. I love this amp. If you guys can't tell, I'm smiling like a freaking idiot because it just sounds so good. All right, so a little bit more treble, a little bit less bass, and a little bit more presence. it's just such an angry tone. Like seriously, the mids are just so aggressive and in your face. They cut through the mix like no other amp, and it just sounds, I can't say enough good things, guys. I'm sorry. Obviously, taste, everything is gonna be subjective, but as far as it goes with me, this amp is the pinnacle of Marshall high gain tone, especially if you're trying to do the heavier stuff where you need a tight and percussive chug, man. This thing just does it in spades. It's so good. So we've got the gain up here around 2 o'clock. Let's go ahead and kick on a Boss SD1 and see how the amp reacts to the SD1. I love it. Let's go ahead and push that bass up. Let's pull the treble back just a tad. I'm speechless. It's good. It's a good amp. One trick on this that you can do, if you really want to push the low end, which it's already got a ton of low end, but if you want to kind of broaden the mids out and push the low end even more, dialing the treble down to 0 does that broadening effect. The same thing that it does on the Mesa dual rectifier, where it really just brings the mids forward in a much broader way and really makes the amp sound massive. As you can tell, we have a ridiculous amount of mids. We have a ridiculous amount of low end. I'm going to pull the mids back. We're going to add a little presence just to add some sizzle to that. Ridiculous. It's so good. I'm probably clipping the hell out of my mic when I do that, but I don't care. I'm having a lot of fun. So let's get that treble back. Let's get those mids back up a little bit. All right, so let's turn that SD1 off. Let's see how it reacts to my Deadwell Duality, which you guys know is my favorite overdrive. All right, so let's see how this amp sounds when you scoop the mids out of it and try to get more of that like 80s cock rock sound out of it. Drop my pick. But yeah, obviously fully capable of that. Let's push the gain even more, get super saturated. Let's get that middle back up, pull those trebles back. Let's go over to gear 3. Let's take that gain back down to 9 o'clock and boost off. As you can see, we already have a pretty good amount of gain going on, and the top end has kind of been rounded off quite a bit, and that's due to the additional compression on this channel. Let's get that gain up to 11 o'clock. I'm gonna I'm losing it. I'm gonna turn the presence up, get some of that high end back into the signal. Gear 3 is ridiculously tight on its own. Go ahead and get that gain up to noon. No boost in the signal. And it sounds that tight, that percussive. It's a little dry on the gain overall, but it still is pretty saturated, especially when you consider it a modded Marshall type sound. Let's go ahead and push that gain up even more. Starting to fatten up because of the additional gain. Let's reduce the bass a little bit. Let's add in a little bit more treble. Too much for my taste because now all that definition and that openness in the mids that I love is gone. But as you can see, if you really want to push it, it'll fatten the amp up. It will smooth those mids out and kind of compress them quite a bit and just make it a little darker overall if that's the type of tone that you're going for. But we're going to pull it back down to just under noon. We're going to kick our Deadwell duality back in. Finally, let's check this amp out with a guitar with active pickups. Where did it go? It's over there. All right, guys, EMG 85 in the bridge of this guitar. All right, guys, one quick riff on the EMGs and then we'll do a drop tuning. Still super clear, still nice and bright. Again, EMGs kind of flatten out and compress things quite a bit, but the amp sounds great with the EMG in front of it as well. Finally, let's drop this down for a drop tune riff and call it a day. Alright guys, that is going to do it for me today on the Splawn Competition 50. I just realized that I didn't even show you guys the overdrive modes that are specific to the foot switch on this amp. I always forget about them because I never use them, but overdrive 1 and 2, we're on overdrive 1, you switch over to overdrive 2, and it gives you even more saturation and smooths the mids out a little bit. When I do my full quick rod demo of my quick rod sitting in the other room, I will be sure to remember to do the pedal for that one. One of my favorite amps on the planet. What do you guys think? Are you a fan of Splawn amps? If you have played them before, do you own them? Have you never gotten to play them? Have you never even heard of them? They used to be super popular in the early 2000s, and now they've kind of faded almost into obscurity a little bit. But it seems as of the last couple of years, they're kind of starting to make a comeback, and I would love to see that happen because I think they are criminally underrated amplifiers, especially for the heavy tones. So what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments. I'll meet you down there to chat about it. If you want to support my channel, down in the description of this video are all my support links, including my Sweetwater affiliate link. Go there, buy yourself something nice from the fine folks at Sweetwater. I get a little kickback. Greatly helps my channel move forward, and it costs you nothing extra. I'd really appreciate it. Or add your name to this fantastic list of people by joining my Patreon community and supporting the channel that way. I will absolutely love you forever, whether you want me to or not. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Kyle here again, and we'll see you in the next video.